So we are close to wrapping up our 10 Commandments sermon series. It's been quite a journey. A lot of reminders in here about who God is and his revelation about himself and what he's telling us about himself, what he's showing us about himself, and what he's asking of us. And today's commandment is another one of those that seems pretty straightforward at face value, and I think it is, but I still think it's worth talking about and why it's important, and maybe just as a reminder to us. So as we've been doing, we're going to turn to Exodus chapter 20, and we're going to read the whole thing up until today's commandment, so that we are reciting and learning and really sealing this in. So Exodus chapter 20, grab a Bible if you have one near you, or your device with your Bible on it, whatever you use, and go to Exodus chapter 20. We're going to start at verse 1 and read right on down through verse 16. Exodus chapter 20, verse 1. And God spoke all these words: I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. And that's where we're going to stop for today. So these last few are the very basic sort of you shall nots. Murdering, that's bad. We talked about the difference between murder and killing. Committing adultery, we talked about how that was really defined in biblical times and why things fall apart when that happens. You shall not steal, we covered last week. We talked about some of the subtle ways that stealing happens, even in workplace hours and things like that. And then today we get this false testimony thing. Some of your translations might say, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Some may say, do not give false testimony against your neighbor. This commandment generally often kind of gets summed up as the do not lie commandment. You should not lie. Well, and that's true, and that's good, and that's it's not wrong as a summary of this commandment, but it might be a bit oversimplified, if that makes sense. So I want to kind of just make sure we're understanding all the facets of that, all the angles at that. And generally speaking, I think what this commandment is saying is that deception and misrepresentation is bad. Deception and misrepresentation is going to kind of make things fall apart. So all of these commandments, I've talked to you about how if we don't keep this commandment, things fall apart. So if we don't honor our parents, then things don't get passed down from generation to generation and everything kind of falls apart. If you commit murder and people are just getting mad at each other and killing each other, well, everything kind of falls apart and it's chaos. When you commit adultery, the family units and the family lines kind of fall apart, and everything just crumbles. When you steal, nobody can trust each other, and there's dishonest gain, and it keeps people from wanting to work hard for things, and everything sort of falls apart. So I call these the falls apart commandments, because if you don't keep these, then the order of things falls apart. And so this is what happens with the ninth commandment. If you give false testimony, if there's deception and misrepresentation and dishonesty, things just start to kind of fall apart. So truth and integrity in what we say and honesty in what we say are valued and essential to hold things together. Lying, misrepresentation, deception, things start to fall apart. And I also think we can think about this in terms of bearing false witness as words or things that we say, and even actions that unjustly hurt another person. So this isn't just telling a lie about yourself or that kind of thing, but something that's done to harm another person, something that destroys another person or damages another person's reputation, that does damage to them in court, something that's where you're kind of intentionally discrediting someone else and unjustly with something untrue. I also think that maybe we overlook that gossip could be in this category. Saying something bad about somebody, particularly that's not true, that's just to be destructive, or it's untrue or unjust, to say this thing about them, but you're going to say it anyway, and it's going to discredit or damage or hurt them. I think that falls into the same category. So giving false testimony or bearing false witness or just saying unjustly untrue or false things about someone, this is kind of what we're talking about. So the big question, the big discussion today is about truth versus deception. When I thought about this, of course, the first story that came to my mind, or the first illustration or example, is the boy who cried wolf kind of story. And this has become sort of folklore, folk story, and it can have 1,000 different versions or iterations, but the general gist of the boy who cried wolf story. A boy decides he thinks it's funny to scare everybody. Maybe they're on a camping trip and they're out in the woods, and some people are nervous that a wolf's coming. So he just decides he's going to get everybody all frazzled and rattled and shaken up. And he runs in and says, "There's a wolf coming, there's a wolf coming, there's a wolf coming." And everybody screams and everybody panics and everybody runs and climbs up in the trees. And then he laughs, and there wasn't really a wolf coming. And then 2 nights later, they're camping, they're out there, and he does the same thing. "There's a wolf coming, there's a wolf coming, there's a wolf coming." And they all scramble and run up in the trees, and then he laughs and says, "Okay, I'm just kidding. There wasn't a wolf coming." And they say they're really upset with him, and they've told him not to do this, but he keeps doing it. Then one day, the boy's in his sleeping bag, and they're all camping out and sleeping again. And he wakes up to the heavy breathing and panting sound, and there's a wolf growling and snarling right next to his face. And there's a real wolf now in the camp, and he screams and he jumps up and he says, "There's a wolf, there's a wolf, there's a wolf." And nobody believes him. And they all say, "Be quiet, we're not falling for it, go back to sleep." And they get mauled and attacked by a wolf. So the moral of that story, of course, is the boy who cried wolf, he's lost his credibility with his voice, right? He bore false witness so many times. He said something that wasn't true and wasn't real and wasn't happening several times. And so then when he gets to the point where he has a real or valid or true thing to say, nobody will hear it. And they won't hear it because he cried wolf many times. So, and now if you watch like Little House on the Prairie growing up, or the Andy Griffith Show, you saw all these different, versions of that same story playing out. But the moral of the story is always the same. The boy who cried wolf is going to be the person who's not listened to anymore. And everything falls apart and breaks down then, because even when you have something true to say, even when you have something right or real or correct or honest or true to say, it doesn't matter, because you've lied so many times, you've cried wolf, you've been deceptive. Your word becomes meaningless. And that's really the problem that this commandment is trying to solve. That's really the situation that this is trying to fix. This is how things break down or fall apart, is that if somebody's dishonest and bears false witness all the time, their voice has no credibility. Their character now is ruined. Their word, their voice is ruined. And when that falls apart, everything kind of falls apart. There's no more trusting of getting anything honest from them. And so you can imagine how things break down really fast if this happens. So I also, as I thought about this, I thought, okay, well, that's the old sort of folklore story. But what's happening today? And this is something I've been giving a great deal of thought to because it really troubles me. The world of the internet today, you know, the old saying, if you saw it on the internet, it has to be true. Except like 80% of the time, that's not true. So what's happening today is technology has advanced so much that even when you see photos of things, they may very well not be real photos, right? And that we've known for years. People could be photoshopped into photos. Photos can be faked, right? So if you say, well, Pastor Dave robbed that 7-Eleven's convenience store in Ohio last night, I'm like, I did not. And I wasn't even in Ohio. I was in Florida, all right? But you can say, no, you did, and you can have a picture that shows me robbing that 7-Eleven store and running out of the store in Ohio last night. But pictures can be faked, right? The technology is so good. And I'm thinking about all the AI stuff, all the artificial intelligence imagery creation stuff. And I mean, it is absolutely mind-blowing what they're able to do. They can make fake pictures of anything, but now they can make fake videos of everything. So it used to be, okay, at least a photo. If I could see a photo, that's proof that it's real. Then they took that away. No, a photo can be faked. Okay, so a photo can be faked, but if I see a video of it happening, then I absolutely can trust that it was real because it's actual video. Well, nope, now that can be created or faked digitally. And the technology is absolutely stunning. So it's so real, but it's not real. They can make videos now of world leaders or politicians saying almost anything they want. And we have no idea if those words actually came out of that person's mouth or not, because the voice reproduction technology is there. So even hearing audio of somebody's voice, they may not be saying what you're hearing the audio say. So anything now that's even in video form cannot be trusted. So basically nothing can be trusted. It used to be that we would say things like, well, seeing is believing. If I see it with my own eyes, well, now when you see it with your own eyes on a screen or thanks to technology, that can't be trusted anymore. And all of these things are being used to twist things. There's such, corruption and bad and malicious agendas. So much of what we see is completely fake. And it's going to be more so and more so. And so I'm sitting here wrestling with this commandment, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, what do we do? How do we know what we can trust? And how do we, and maybe you're thinking, I don't know what this has to do with the commandment. You're like reaching here. I know. Just stick with me for another like 60 seconds. Because I'm thinking, what does this mean? And how do we sort through anything? And the reality is we can't. So people will stop believing anything that they see digitally or thanks to technology or on screens. And so I thought, well, then what does that mean for us in this commandment in terms of speaking truth and bearing true witness, and that you can trust what's being heard? I think that we are on our way back to a time and a system where the only reliable thing is to hear something directly from a source that's a reliable source. So what I'm trying to say to you is that ultimately people are going to say, yeah, I saw a video. Well, I don't believe that video. Well, I heard this. I saw a picture that I don't believe any of that. We're going to get to a point in our society and in our culture where the word in person of an honorable and trustworthy, truth-telling person is the only thing that people will believe. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying? And that's why this becomes so important. We're on our way back to a system or a situation where the only reliable thing will be a reliable source or a reliable person. So the word of an honorable, trustworthy, and truth-telling person in person will be the only thing that people believe. We're getting to a point where someone will say we're entering a new world war, and this president and this world leader said this, and or this state leader says this, or this city leader says this. No, I want to hear from a person who I trust and I know is an honorable truth teller, and that they're telling me what they verifiably know to be true. That's going to be, and maybe it is already, the only thing that we can really trust. Seeing isn't believing anymore. Hearing isn't believing anymore from secondary or third-party sources or technology or media. I need that person I can trust. Our society, our culture needs that person that they can trust. So I can't see you guys to know how you're responding, but I hope are you with me on this concept? Do you understand that this is a situation we're getting back to? That everything's so confusing, we need to hear from that person. That means that this commandment becomes really, really important. I've said this with every commandment. It's like God knows us. He knew how deceptive people would be. And so if he knows how deceptive we are, he knows the value and the importance of this, that you are going to be a person who does not give false testimony or bear false witness. The fact that you can be a person whose word is still trusted, that you have that credibility, that is going to be so important in this culture, in this society, even in the end times or the last days as we accelerate toward Jesus coming back. Everybody's making things up. Everybody's misrepresenting things. Everybody's lying about everything. And lying is bad. And misrepresenting is bad. And this deception is bad. So you and I need to be the people who are bearing truth, who do not bear false witness, who are not lying about things to discredit others, but our yes is yes, our no is no. We're speaking truth all the time. We have that honesty and integrity, and our words are still credible. You and I are going to need that. And it's going to help us be witnesses for Christ. So as I thought about all of that, I thought, well, this is great. So we're not supposed to lie. We need to speak truth and not bear false witness so that, our word is true and we're credible and all those kind of things. That's great. Then I thought, are there any eyebrow raising questions as I look through the rest of the Bible, as I read through and think about this ethic of truth telling? And like I've done with several of the others, I've got to get into what I consider like a gray, muddy area and talk about it. So there's a story in the Bible that immediately brings this right to the forefront. And that's in Joshua chapter 2. You don't have to go there with me. I'll just sum up the story. You remember in Joshua chapter 2, maybe that God is getting ready to bring his people in and take over Jericho. And he sends in a couple of spies. And right inside the city gates, they find the house of this woman, Rahab. And Rahab is a prostitute. Rahab lives a questionable life, has a questionable lifestyle, lives with ungodly value system and morals. And she's probably most likely prone to lying and deception. So she is a lying, deceiving prostitute who lives just inside the city gates. Now, when God sends his people in as spies, she shelters them, and she deceives the other people and sends them down the wrong path in order to protect God's agents, God's spies, God's people. So what's so fascinating about this is that Rahab intentionally lies and deceives, and God seems very pleased with it. That should make us slightly uncomfortable. That should raise an eyebrow on our theological positions and doctrinal positions. So she's a prostitute who shelters God's people and lies and deceives intentionally, and God seems pleased with it. In fact, God seems so pleased with it that later on in Hebrews, we hear about Rahab being commended for her loyalty and commitment to God and for her faith. And in James, we hear about Rahab being commended for her faith and her loyalty to God. And so the whole story kind of just bursts our bubble a little bit, gets into our, at least for me, it raises questions. How is it that God is pleased? And by the way, Rahab becomes a step in the lineage of Jesus, in the lineage and family tree of the Messiah. Rahab gets mentioned, which is unheard of that women were mentioned anyway in genealogy. So it's really remarkable that God chooses to sort of honor and elevate Rahab in this situation. And so, how is God pleased with her lying and with her deception? And ultimately, I think we have to go back to what I've talked about in several of these commandments. God's interested in what is honorable or what is shameful. So just like murder and killing, the difference there was, is this an honorable thing or a shameful thing? Is this self-motivated or is this God-motivated? And is this the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? It can be the same activity, the same action, even in the adultery conversation. It was about what is going on in your heart, in your mind, and what are your motives. But ultimately, Rahab lies, and God seems to be pleased. And it seems like God is more concerned about what's going on in Rahab's heart and her motivation. And we do know, and the story is weird because we know that God doesn't like her lifestyle of prostitution or lying, that these are not God values generally. And that's why the story is kind of jarring, because God is showing us that a bad person who's generally doing bad things can decide to worship God and honor God. And that's what Rahab does. She decides to worship God and honor God. Somewhere in that story, somewhere in her situation, she decides when these guys are there that I think God is real. And if God is real, I want to be on his side of things. I want to be on his team. She has faith. She has faith in God, and she's willing to take risky acts and make bold moves to demonstrate her faith in God. And that seems to be what God honors and what God lifts up. She has love for God, faith in God, belief in God, and loyalty to God. And the rules of the moment of what seems right or wrong either get kind of bent or overlooked, or they just don't apply the same way in the situation, because what she's doing is the right thing by God. She's protecting God's men. And so now we have to struggle with this and say, okay, so wait, it's just okay to lie sometimes as long as it's like, we think we're doing a godly thing. Well, I think of this as like, would I hop on a train without a ticket to save someone who'd just been kidnapped? So someone's just been kidnapped. I'm the only one who knows, and I have an opportunity to chase after them. It's wrong to hop on the train without having a ticket. But would I hop on the train without having a ticket to go save someone? Of course I would. And is that the right thing, by the way? Would God want me to do that? I think he would. I think he would want me to save the person. You could also think about this in terms of like Underground Railroad, of smuggling people out of slavery. Well, did they break laws? Absolutely, they broke laws. To hide someone, to hide a slave that you had broken out of slavery in your home, in your basement, to smuggle them from place to place at night, it was illegal. Everyone who was involved in the Underground Railroad was breaking the law. Are we glad they broke the law? Yes. Would I have broken the law to do that? Yes. Would God want us to break the law for that? Yes, I think so. So we have to try to like get ourselves past some of these little, everything's these little check boxes of right, wrong, yes, no, black and white, and get ourselves into a mindset of it's about loving God and doing godly things or not. So every one of these commandments brings us back to kind of wrestle with that a little bit. Like, what is God trying to say here? What is God trying to do? And ultimately, it's, are we on the side of God? So if you're going to lie, it better be that you're lying for God. or it better be that you're lying for godly reasons or just reasons to do a godly thing. In other words, what is the motive? What is the intention? God is about his values, about love, worship, honor, heart, mind, faith, belief, loyalty, commitment. He's more about that than he is about legalism kind of rules, like Pharisaical, yes, no kind of rules, black and white stuff. God is more about people that are willing to serve him. So is this an evil purpose, or is this a holy purpose? And so I think that's at the heart of this commandment. The commandment to just say it's a commandment to not lie is overly simplistic. It's a commandment to not intentionally deceive or hurt or disparage someone because you're hurting them or ruining them with untrue things, and or you are, by saying untrue things, discrediting yourself, so you lose your ability to have witness. And anything that you're doing that's just to be destructive is not a godly purpose. That's what I think this commandment is saying. Use your words, use your witness, use your testimony about others for godly purposes, for godly gains, for godly things. Deceiving to hurt or ruin someone else is bad. Deceiving just for the preservation of yourself is bad. Deceiving for a purpose that's against what God would want is bad. Deceiving with dishonorable intentions at all is bad. So we walk away from this and we say, okay, well, this has been an interesting discussion. So really, what do I need to do? Well, I think what we need to do is to make sure that we are known as credible witnesses. Someone ought to be able to say, that person, they're a Jesus-loving, Jesus-following, commandment-keeping Christian. They're going to be a credible person. They're going to tell us the truth. They're going to give true witness. They're going to be a person we can rely on. They're going to be a person we can count on. Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. Be known as credible witnesses. We should have love for God and love for others that keeps us from saying untrue things or bearing false witness against our neighbors. If we fail in this, we lose our voice. We lose our credibility. We lose our witness. We hurt other people, and the whole thing falls apart. Imagine if the boy who cried wolf, if everybody in society becomes a boy who cries wolf, then nobody has the ability then to speak truth in any situation. More and more as time goes on in the culture we're in and the situations we're in and with the technology that's out there, more and more we're going to get to this situation where the only reliable thing is going to be the words of a reliable person who speaks with integrity and gives true witness and truth statements. And that needs to be us. And so we need to keep this commandment so that we keep that voice and we can be witnesses for Christ. Amen. Amen.